I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. My guest this week is Lida Citroën.
Influence isn't just about making positive change. It can be about saying something doesn't feel right here and we need to stop. So measuring influence isn't just about what we see in a graph. It's sometimes about a very anecdotal experience. It's that qualitative versus quantitative. But I think the ultimate goal of influence, if you were to ask me honestly, I think it's knowing that people are going to take our message and do something with it.
Lida Citroën is a personal branding and reputation management expert. She is a keynote speaker, trainer, LinkedIn learning instructor, TEDx speaker, and executive coach. She helps global influencers, CEOs, executives, entrepreneurs, and military veterans amplify their presence, manage the impression they make with target audiences, and increases their authentic and unique voice and value. She is a writer for military.com, and she is the author of 6 previous books. My interview with Lida Citroën is coming right up. But first,
my dad works in B2B marketing, but I never really knew what that meant. Then one day my dad came by my school for career day and told everyone in my class he was a big ROAS man. Then he just kept saying things like, the bigger the ROAS, the better, over and over. My friends still laugh at me to this day. I think it means calculating a return on ad spend. One thing's for sure. I'll be known as the ROAS man's kid for the rest of my days. Why couldn't you just be a fireman or a lawyer? Why? You ruined my life, Dad.
Not everyone gets B2B, but LinkedIn has the people who do. And with ads on LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people based on job title, industry, likelihood to buy, and more. Start converting your B2B audience into high-quality leads today. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Lida Citroën, welcome to On Brand.
Thank you so much, Nick. I am excited to have a conversation.
I am excited to chat about really so much of your work, both your corporate background, your transition to personal branding. But one thing that I wanted to start on with your background as a writer for military.com, helping military veterans amplify their presence. I think that fascinated me. And what is it about being a veteran and transitioning out of that and finding ways to amplify presence, voice, that feels important, but I'm also wager to say it might be missed by many?
Well, I think you're absolutely correct. It's missed by most. It really came to me in 2009. I have no personal connection to the military. My parents were European, so we didn't have anybody in our family who had served in the U.S. military. But I knew when I started my company the year before that I wanted to create space to somehow give back. I didn't know what that was going to look like, but I created space for it. And I said, I'll know it when it finds me. And sitting at a Denver Broncos football game, they did a tribute to military veterans. It happened to be the week of Veterans Day. And these soldiers at the time were on the field talking about just how difficult it is to come from a culture as unique and formalized and special as the military and try to reintegrate into civilian world. And I thought, my gosh, that's what I know how to do. I mean, I help people position themselves, especially in highly complex and competitive markets. I thought, well, I could totally help. The problem was I didn't know anything about the military. I just had a passion to serve those who'd served. So it was very much an uphill battle, but I've learned so much in the last 15 years. 3 of my books have been for this community. And what I get back from giving to them is, 100-fold. The transition isn't simple. It's not like, you and I going from one corporation to another or even industry to another. We're talking about a big culture shift. And a lot of civilians don't understand what that is. So not only are they navigating their own challenges, but they're navigating a community that doesn't really know what to do with them. And that's just where I found a place to help. And it's been a long and wonderful 15 years so far.
Well, here's another disconnect that this civilian brings to it is talking about presence. And my probably incorrect assumption would be that people from the military would come out of it with presence, but does it not translate? Do we need presence to be represented differently in the workplace versus the military? What specifically with presence management is your work with veterans? How does that look?
Sure. And honestly, I would make the same assumption 15 years ago. 98% of the American population hasn't served. So there's 98% of the population that would make that same conclusion. Influence in the military is very much tied to rank. It's tied to status and, achieving certain levels, which is all displayed on their shoulders, their chest, and their collar. That rank and status is where you get presence and influence. In the civilian world, we know brand, for instance, is experiential. Right? Companies have culture, they have personality, influence, and presence doesn't necessarily come only from the people who have the job title. So that's a big shift. You take someone who's achieved tremendous status in the military and who can walk into a room where people stand at attention. Now I have to coach them to walk into a job interview and nobody stands up. And nobody gives them that deference because of what they've achieved in a very different world. And it does play different. We focus on things like authenticity and community and being ambassadors for the organizations that we stand for. And that sometimes plays really different than what they've come out of in the military.
So, speaking of what they came out of in the military, talk about what you came out of with your background on the corporate side of work.
When I look back on the 20 years that I spent in corporate, it was working with some of the most fabulous global brands, helping to launch new products and new companies and new services and being in that heartbeat of what brand really is, which, as you and I know, comes before the marketing, and really setting that expectation. And it was so vibrant and so exciting. I just got to a point where it was kind of like, is that all there is, right? As exciting and vibrant as it is, I'd done it so many times that to me, I thought, well, what if we took all those same qualities and methodology and skills and we applied them to individuals? And I happened to start my business in 2008. And if you remember 2008, the entire world, or especially here, our economy was falling apart. So yay, I became a business owner. But what people needed in that moment, at the same time I'm thinking about this, is everybody was desperately trying to position themselves. Got to hold on to the job, got to get a better job, got to get a new job. And so the timing lined up perfectly to take what I'd learned in the corporate world and just apply it to people who are so much more complicated and so much more exciting because there's nothing consistent. And so I leveraged a lot of what I learned in corporate. I still go back to it because a lot of my clients run companies. So we can tie personal brand to corporate brand and make sure that those anchor. But I think people are far more fascinating.
So when you talk about people,
Mm-hmm.
which people specifically do you work most with when it comes to personal branding? Is it leaders? Is it others throughout an organization? Entrepreneurs? All of the above?
I was going to say that. My mission is to serve all. the ones who hire me for one-on-one coaching tend to be, senior management all the way up to to the C-suite, because that's where the visibility and the risk is highest. So they may be someone who says, my board of directors isn't supporting me. I'm having high turnover with my staff. I think it could be my leadership. Or maybe they made a mistake. So I actually do reputation repair work, which is sort of right-sizing mistakes or misperceptions in the market. And that typically, those types of complicated scenarios run at a higher level. But a lot of my clients are entrepreneurs. They're passionate people who want to do something more meaningful and start it on their own. They're thought leaders in their own space, authors, other speakers. And what's really cool, Nick, is I work in over 30 countries. So it's not just a US market that's thinking about this. When I speak to audiences, I can have college students, entry level, mid management, as well as executive. I'm a little industry agnostic, which has kept it pretty fun for me.
I would agree. I always think there's that conventional wisdom that says, you should specialize in, dental practices in the Midwest and really find this sweet spot. But I'm the same way. I like working with everybody. So when you talk about reputation repair, I would again, Captain Obvious territory here. It feels like is the repair work harder than establishing a reputation from the get-go?
It's harder on me. I will say that. And I hear some absolutely heartbreaking stories. People that are in the wrong place at the wrong time, or trying to do the right thing and it lands horribly wrong. And then there are people who are just careless. Right. And I try not to be judge and jury, but it's hard on me emotionally to get in there with people and really unpack what happened and what we can learn and what we need to do going forward. So I tend to be careful. If somebody's just looking for a public relations solution, there are wonderful practitioners who can help with that. If it's all about SEO and manipulating Google, there are other people that do that. I really try to help people figure out how to have a path forward and what that looks like from a very deep, real place, and then building out from that. So there is a lot of opportunity right now for anyone listening who wants to get into that. There's a lot of opportunity because, boy, people cannot keep their hands off keyboards. But I'm in the second chance business. That's what I like to say. And I think everybody who's made a mistake, within reason, I think I want to be able to see if I can help them find a path forward. And I say within reason because I have my own boundaries of what I can bring into my life. And I've stretched those boundaries. And sometimes it's been fabulously rewarding. Sometimes it hasn't. So having done it for so long, I'm a pretty good guess of what works in my practice and what I sometimes need to refer to someone else.
On Brand, we'll be right back after this.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Hennika Watkins-Porter hosts The Entrepreneurial You, empowering entrepreneurs with insights on leadership, business, and success. Hennika, tell listeners what to expect from your show.
So we provide innovative business strategies and practical solutions to common entrepreneurial challenges.
And where can people subscribe?
Find us at hennikawatkinsporter.com, as well as the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcasts.net, or search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
Now, back to the show. So, your new book, tell us about the new rules of influence.
I'm really excited about this one. So I've written 6 what I would call business books that are, how to build executive brand, how to repair reputation, how to build personal brand as you're coming out of the military, books like that. But when I worked with Barrett Kohler, my new publisher, they said, don't write a business book. Write a book that you feel the world needs now. And I was like, what does that mean? But I really thought about it, and I had thought I was going to write a different book, and then this book emerged. When I looked back at all the clients I've worked with, all the audiences I've spoken to, all the articles and everything that I've written, I thought really what we're all trying to say is, I want my voice to matter. I want to know that when I raise my hand in a meeting, or if I've got an idea to change my community or change the world, that there's a path to do that. And traditionally, what we look to for influence, at least the way I was taught many years ago, and I've still taken courses and read books, it's all been about executive presence. You had to look a certain way. You had to sound a certain way. You had to have gravitas, which everybody says is important, but nobody can actually teach us how to get. How fascinating is that? Right? A lot of fun. And I thought, but is that really the way the world works now? After the pandemic, we saw so clearly this need for human connectedness, for people to just be real with us. And it may not be pretty, but just tell us the truth and show us that soft underbelly and build, connection through service and being inclusive, which has gotten so misunderstood. And I thought, I think what we need now is new rules. And then my publisher said, okay, now you've figured out what the world needs. Write the book from your heart. And I was like, what? What does that mean? But they unleashed something. And the feedback we've gotten so far is overwhelming. I mean, there's a great place for business books, but I think we need something that's practical, conversational, and easy to chew on. And that's what I tried to do in this book for anyone, wherever they are, who says, what if I could make a difference? That's what this book serves.
Without giving the whole book away, or if we're maybe in a long elevator ride and I'm getting a bit more than an elevator pitch on it, and I say, wonderful, tell me more. How can I do that? How do you make it easy for me? What's something in the book that jumps off the pages and that can really help people?
Well, I think the way, I would even say the way the book is structured is what makes it easy, right? So we took these 10 rules and we chunked it into 4 sections. So the first section that we talk about is, why do you want to have influence? Why are you here? What is your purpose, right? Really kind of going back to what I talked about earlier, that it's getting in there and being clear with yourself. And yes, there are a lot of self-help books that do this, but we do it in a different way in this book. And I talk about, if you're clear that you want to have influence, now the 3 rules you have to think about involve things like courage and being real with people. You don't get to hide behind scripts and airbrushed photos and whatever that gravitas thing is. And you have to build credibility, right? So I package those rules under your sense of purpose and intention. Then we move on to your audience. The second chunk is, who do you want to have influence with? I love when somebody says, I want to influence everyone in the world. My next question is, what's your marketing budget? Because that ain't going to happen, folks, right? So who do you want to serve? Who are the people? Who's your tribe? Who's your community? And then really giving some practical rules around how to do that. And then the last 2 chunks are, how do you want to serve and where do you want to serve? So it really is a roadmap, and the rules are baked into it that make it easy. And it's not something that you read the book and you think, okay, check the box, I have influence. You have to put it into practice. So when I say something like, being a storyteller, which is rule 8, how do you weave narrative and story into your communication? And how you will influence people? Because what we know across cultures is stories work. If I'm telling you my story, then I'm setting it up for success, that you'll relate my story in a clearer way than if I just read you my resume. We know that when we have to share complicated data, story actually helps. Put it in a framework, give me a picture. So there are all these really practical rules that show you why, who, how, and where to create influence. And then we finish with, measuring influence, because if we can't measure it, how do we know if it's working? And it's all kind of done in a very like I said, conversational tone. I share a lot of my own stories, successes and failures, which is terrifying, by the way, uh, and a lot of my clients' experiences. And I think that kind of makes it something for everyone. And that's what I keep hearing. I hear from young people who say this kind of gives me a roadmap for how to be in my professional life. And I hear from leaders who say, I've been doing it well, but I think there's a couple things I can take out of this to do it better.
And that really seems to get back to the A word that you mentioned earlier, authenticity, that we also talk about a lot, but nobody says, yep, that's important. But we don't really give a lot of keys as to, so how do you do that? And I think, especially when you talked about young people, beginning in their careers, and I think sometimes, I'm not sure if it's the age of social media, but we sort of feel like, oh, it's best to keep my true self private, as opposed to really finding ways to bring your whole self to work.
I love that you brought that up because actually, so the second rule, I titled it Be Real because I didn't want to use authentic. And
Ah.
I explained it in the book, authenticity, authentic. It was Merriam-Webster's 2023, word of the year. I don't know if it got a crown or what. But, here's the thing. If I say to you, Nick, be authentic with me, you're going to be like, well, I thought I was. But if I say, get real with me, let's get real here. Let's talk about the real issue. Then all of a sudden at a basic level, we know what that means. So that's what I talk about in the book is we need to see people. We need to hear from them. But there is a difference between being real or authentic and being transparent. And to your point, I am not a fan of transparency. As I mentioned earlier, I think people can be too transparent, especially behind a keyboard, and it can get them in trouble because you don't get to take it back. And the way I define those is if you're being real with me or authentic, and I ask you a question, you're going to give me a real answer, right? You're not going to make something up. You're not going to hide behind, some type of confusing information. You're going to be truthful and genuine. You also reserve the right to say, I'm not comfortable answering that, Lida. Transparency, on the other hand, is open kimono, right? Everybody sees everything. And that's risky. That's risky. And I don't know that it keeps us safe. A lot of my clients have had trauma. They've had, situations they're not proud of. And, a Supreme Court decision comes down or somebody makes a public statement on social media and they feel this pressure to be part of that conversation, but it brings up things they're not comfortable talking about. And that's where I push back on transparency. I think we're allowed to keep some things private. I absolutely do. I don't think there's any social obligation to share everything. In business and in government, we should be more transparent. But as individuals, and I say teach your kids this, especially with social media, I don't think we need to. I think we can still show people who we are and what we care about and what we love and what we dream about and where we're going without opening every closet.
That's a really good point, and I love that you included sharing it with your kids, because I feel like the message isn't getting through, and when we aren't real with ourselves and bringing all of that to work, it really diminishes the impact that we can have. Now, you mentioned impact and measuring a bit, and maybe it's the marketer in me, but I have to just get a quick preview of how can we measure our influence?
Well, obviously there's a variety of KPIs we can measure. And I do talk about those in the book, but I think moving past that, going back to social media, we often think of followers, right? And how many people engage with our content. Those can be good metrics, right? If I want to have influence, if I want to share this message with a lot of people, do a lot of people engage with me, right? Are they paying attention to what I say online and responding either with questions or reactions, right? The like button, whatever that is. But in a more intimate way, if you're in a meeting and you want to have influence, what does that reception look like, right? Are you being taken seriously? Have you established enough credibility? Do people feel that you've been inclusive to bring all the voices into the room that need to be there? And if they do, are they then responding favorably to what you're offering as an idea or as a pushback? Influence isn't just about, making positive change. It can be about saying something doesn't feel right here and we need to stop. So measuring influence isn't just about what we see in a graph. It's sometimes about a very anecdotal experience. It's that qualitative versus quantitative. But I think the ultimate goal of influence, if you were to ask me, honestly, I think it's knowing that people are going to take our message and do something with it. And sometimes that is hearing somebody else create something based on something we inspired them to do. And how cool would that be? Right? We don't have to have credit for it. We don't need to have our name attached to it. But if I planted a seed with someone and inspired them and motivated them to want to grow in a different way, and they do that, that's a really cool form of influence.
I love that. It is a great story. It makes me smile. And now it is my privilege to get to ask you, Lida, for a brand that has made you smile recently.
Oh, a lot of brands make me smile. Some make me want to throw my phone at the wall.
I didn't say what type of smile. It can be a shaking fist at sky smile.
The one that comes to mind, and it may be a little cliche, is Chick-Fil-A. And what I love about the brand isn't just the fact that they're known for treating their staff well, and they're known for treating customers well. They stay consistent. And you and I both know in the corporate world, in the product world, consistency is hard. It is very easy to get pulled in different directions. And there's a brand that really stays consistent. We don't always have to love the brand, but if there's consistency, then we tend to trust the brand. So I love that they support the community. They give back to programs in their community that they're passionate about. And that really speaks to their brand values and their voice. Their staff tends to be happy. And more recently, what made me smile is we did drive through at Chick-fil-A the other day, had the dogs in the car. The person was very smiling, very happy. My dogs, for some reason, did not bark and go crazy. And the person saw that we had 2 dogs in the back seat and gave us 2 little bowls full of whipped cream, like the little pup cup. And I just thought, they didn't have to. I would have been happy with Chick-fil-A and the food and everything was priced right and all that. But it was just that extra thing that it just made me smile in the moment. And so there you go, Chick-fil-A.
Great on-brand answer there with consistency, reputation, and so forth. Lida, where can we send folks to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Well, I'm pretty active on social media, so it's pretty hard not to find me. But my website is Lida 360, and it's LIDA 360. I'm very active on LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube. I tend to give out a lot of information, so people who follow me, I'm not here just to get everything I want to give. And so I tend to reward my followers and my fans with just a lot of good information and tools. So website, social media, whatever works. The book is available, Audible, as well as at Amazon and where books are sold. So
awesome. Well, we will link up to that in our show notes, which folks can always find at onbrandpodcast.com. Lida Citroën, thanks for being on brand with us.
Thank you so much, Nick. It's been fun.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.